All right, guys. So let's kind of just do this last day of notes. I wanted to go through specifically filling out an entire unit circle with you guys so that you could see it done and can do it yourself on your own if you would like to recreate and just practice that. So yeah, let's dive right into it. The first spot that I always start at is the far right side right here. I'm going to label the angle measures out here. So the angle measures at this spot would be 0 degrees. This spot is also 360 degrees. Okay, if we're talking radians, this is 0 radians, but it could also be 2 pi radians. It really just depends. The point that is on the edge of the circle right here is the point 1, 0, because the radius of this circle is 1, and we don't go up in a y direction at all, so the point is 1, 0. Then I go counterclockwise from here up into the first quadrant. So now I'm taking a look right here. This is our 30-degree angle. Okay, 30 degrees is also related to pi over 6 for radians. The point right here is going to be the square root of 3 over 2, comma, 1/2. And so for those of you who might have missed it yesterday, you can see at this point right here, we're going to travel further in the x direction than we would going up and down in the y direction. And then which of these two numbers is bigger? Well, radical 3 over 2 is larger than 1/2. So that's how I can tell radical 3 over 2 is in my x and 1/2 is in my y, because radical 3 over 2 is bigger and the horizontal distance we travel is larger than the vertical distance. All right, let's take a look at the next spot. The next spot up here that we have is our 45-degree angle. Okay, 45-degree angle is also referred to as pi over 4 radians. That point right there is radical 2 over 2, comma, radical 2 over 2. And guys, if you already know how to fill out this circle, by all means, just fly right through it and skip through this part of the video. The next angle measure that we get to right here is our 60-degree angle. 60-degree angle is also referred to as pi over 3. So 60-degree angle is going to be 1/2, comma, radical 3 over 2. So the nice part is our 30-degree angles and our 60-degree angles are related, just the x and the y's switch places. All right, if we were to go straight up and down, remembering that the radius is 1, we moved 0 in the x direction and we moved 1 in the y direction. The angle measure that goes up here are 90 degrees and pi over 2 radians. Okay, let's continue this on. So the next spot that we have is 30 degrees past 90 degrees. So this is our 120-degree angle, also known as our, this one is 4 pi over 3. Nope, 2 pi over 3. I apologize. 2 pi over 3. The point that we have right here is going to match our other 60-degree angle. So it's 1/2, comma, radical 3 over 2. But what's special about the 1/2 is now it's negative 1/2 because we are to the left of our y-axis. So now we're in negative x directions. Okay, and then the next point after that one that we have is our next 45-degree angle, which 45 degrees past 90 degrees is 135 degrees, also known as 3 pi over 4. And then the point here is negative radical 2 over 2, comma, radical 2 over 2. Continuing the pattern, we need to now go 30 degrees past 120. That gives us 150 degrees. And it gives us pi. This is 5 pi over 6 radians. The point here is negative radical 3 over 2, comma, positive 1/2. Okay, and as you can see, it's just the flipped version of our 120-degree angle. Okay, so I hope it's starting to come together for you guys. The next spot that we have is our 180 degrees, or it could be our pi radians. Both of those things are what exist right there. Here we have -1 in the x direction and 0 in the y direction. After that, we're going to go 30 degrees past 180. That's going to give us 210 degrees. Okay, 210 degrees, if we're talking radians, is 7 pi over 6 radians. And then our point that exists right here is negative radical 3 over 2, comma negative 1/2. Now everything is negative because we're in the third quadrant. Continuing around, we have 15 degrees past 210 is our next 45-degree angle. So that's going to give us 225 degrees, also known as 5 pi over 4 radians. And then again, everything is negative, so negative radical 2 over 2, comma negative radical 2 over 2. And then our last spot in the third quadrant, 15 more degrees, is going to give us 40 degrees, which is our next pi over 3. So then our next pi over 3 is going to be 4 pi over 3. The point that exists right here, now we're negative 1/2 in the x direction, negative radical 3 over 2 in the y direction. And that finishes us filling out the third quadrant. So then let's take a look at this point right here. We're 0 in the x direction, -1 in the y direction. The degrees that we're at right here are 270 degrees. The radians are 3 pi over 2. Okay, so then continuing right around, we are now in the fourth and final quadrant. So this one right here is our last 60-degree angle. So we went 30 degrees past 270. That gave us 300 degrees. Let's move that down just a touch. So 300 degrees. 300 degrees is also 5 pi over 3. The point that we're at is positive 1/2 now, but we're still negative in the y direction, so negative radical 3 over 2. So our next point is the last 45-degree angle in our unit circle, and that's going to be 315 degrees, so 315 degrees. This is also known as 7 pi over 4 radians. The point that we're at is radical 2 over 2, comma negative radical 2 over 2. And then the last one right here is 15 more degrees, so that's going to give us 330 degrees, which is our last pi over 6, so 11 pi over 6. And then that point is radical 3 over 2 in the x direction, negative 1/2 in the y direction. Okay, and so there it is, the completed unit circle. So if you use all the same colors like I did, it looks really pretty. Okay, if you used all the same color, that's cool too, you know? All is good. So the next thing I would like to do with all of this information is just kind of fill out the table below. The way we're going to fill this out is we have to remember that sine is the y value of all of the points. Cosine is the x value of all of the points. And then tangent is the y over x value of all of the points. So let's just go through all of the sines first. So 30 degrees, the y value at 30 degrees is positive 1/2. The y value at 45 degrees is radical 2 over 2. The y value, or the sine, at 60 degrees is radical 3 over 2. The y value, or the sine, of 0 degrees, or 0 radians, is going to be 0. The sine of 90 degrees is going to be 1. The sine of 180 degrees, again, is going to be 0. And then the sine of 270 degrees is going to be negative 1. Okay, now going through all the x values. So the x value at 30 degrees is radical 3 over 2, which would be the cosine of 30 degrees. The cosine of 45 degrees, radical 2 over 2. the cosine of 60 degrees would be 1/2. The cosine at 0 is going to be 1 because the x value at 0 is 1. The cosine of 90 degrees is 0. The cosine at 180 degrees is -1. And then the cosine of 270 degrees is 0. Finally, we're going to look at our tangents. So tangent is y over x. And these can be a little bit difficult to start with, but the number that we box is going to be a number that you should probably memorize just so you don't have to keep going through the same steps over and over and over. So the tangent at 30 degrees, y over x, gives us 1/2 over radical 3 over 2. That gets converted to 1/2 times 2 over radical 3, which finally ends with radical 3 over 3 once you rationalize the denominator. Tangent of 45 degrees, or pi over 4, is always 1. The tangent of 60 degrees, or pi over 3, is going to be the reciprocal, so this is radical 3 over 2 over 1/2, which that gives us radical 3 over 2 times 2 over 1, which just gives us radical 3. The tangent of 0 is going to be 0 over 1, which is just 0. The tangent of 90 degrees is going to be 1 over 0, which this is undefined. Okay, you can just call it U and D if you would like for short. 180 degrees, the tangent is 0 over -1, so that gives us 0 again. And then the tangent of 270 is -1 over 0, which again is another undefined one that we get. So, by all means, tangent is definitely the hardest, just looking at all of these. But square root 3 over 3, square root 3, going to show up so many times. So just try to memorize that number. Just knowing what's going to be on top. Radical 3 over 2, or is 1/2 going to be on top? If 1/2 is on top, then it's radical 3. If 1/2 is on top, then it's radical 3 over 3. If radical 3 over 2 is on top, then it's radical 3. Okay? So, let's look at these questions and see exactly how we would answer them. Having that unit circle at the top is about to be super helpful for us through this next section. Sine of 30 degrees, we just filled that out, right? That is 1/2. The cosine of 2 pi over 3. So this is saying, what is the x value at 2 pi over 3? So then we come up here and we say, okay, 2 pi over 3 exists right here. So the x value is -1/2. So then we drop down here and we say the cosine of 2 pi over 3 is -1/2. This is asking us for the sine of -2 pi over 3. Okay, so this is a little bit different approach. So -2 pi over 3. So now we need to go in the negative direction. So this would be -pi over 3, because that's -60 degrees. So then -2 pi over 3, we would just need to add another pi over 3 to it. So this is -2 pi over 3, which is the same as our 240 degrees. It's asking us for the sine, so the y value. So the y value right here is negative radical 3 over 2. So that gives us negative radical 3 over 2. Okay, so that's the method that you have to go through when you're doing these questions, guys. And basically you want to get so quick and efficient at this method that you just have it memorized. Okay, -2 pi over 3, that's going to be a 60 degree angle. Okay, negative means it's in the bottom of the unit circle, which means it's going to be a negative y value, so negative radical 3 over 2. That's kind of the thought process you should be going through when you do these questions. All right, tangent of 5 pi over 3. So, without looking at the unit circle, let's try to just figure out this question. So 5 pi over 3, that is one of our 60 degree angles. We know that because it's divided by 3. Okay, and then we need to think of, where is 5 pi going to be? Well, it's almost 6 pi over 3, which would give us 2 pi. So that's telling us we are currently in the fourth quadrant because it's almost a full circle, 5 pi over 3. So we're thinking of our 60-degree angle that's in the fourth quadrant, so it should look something like this. So what is that point on the unit circle? Well, tangent is going to be radical 3 over 2 negative positive 1/2 in the x direction. So then it's y over x, so negative radical 3 over 2 over 1/2. That's going to give us negative radical 3. Okay, so that's kind of the thought process of how to do these without necessarily looking at the unit circle. It's just having it memorized down to the point that we can draw that little triangle either in our minds or on the piece of paper that's in front of us. Okay, same idea here. Let's do the sine of 150. So how I'm thinking of this, 150 degrees. We're not quite 180, so we're just under it by 30 degrees. So this is one of our 30-degree angles. Sine means that it's going to be shorter distance because it's 30 degrees, doesn't go as high. So that means the sine of 150 is 1/2. All right, tangent of negative 210. So the tangent of negative 210, we need to think about where is negative 210. So if we're drawing this circle, negative 180 would be here. 210 is just past that, right? So we're going negative 210 degrees. Tangent is y, so this is a 30-degree angle because it's 30 degrees past 180. And then we're going tangent, so that's y. The y value is 1/2 out of 30. The x value is radical 3 over 2. So because the half is on top, that's telling me, oh wait, one of these is negative. The x value is negative, so then it's negative radical 3 over 3. And I know my thought process might be confusing right now, but I promise you, thinking it through like this every single time is going to help you get better at these questions. So not using the unit circle every time is going to be more helpful. But if you really can't figure out where the angle measure is or where the degree is or where the radian is, look at your unit circle, get an idea of where you are. Okay, so next one, 5 pi over 4. So if I'm thinking over 4 means that this is a 45-degree angle. Cosine, so it doesn't matter if it's sine or cosine. 45-degree angle automatically tells me radical 2 over 2 as long as it's sine or cosine. Now we just need to figure out, is it positive or is it negative? So 5 pi is 1 more than 4 pi. 4 pi over 4 would be this value, right? It would be our pi value. So then if we're just past that to the 5 pi over 4, that means the x value is negative. So we're negative radical 2 over 2. Tangent of negative 315 degrees. So negative 315 degrees, you need to think about where it is, right? Because it ends in a 5, automatically tells us it's a 45 degree. That's kind of nice because the tangent of any 45 degree is just 1. Now we need to make sure, is it positive 1 or is it negative 1? So then we come here, negative 315. So that's almost 330 degrees. So that's going to put us right about here. So we're back in the first quadrant. Well, tangent is positive in the first quadrant. So then we can say it's positive 1. Okay, last one here of these ones. So it's the cosine of 7 pi over 6. Pi over 6 automatically tells me 30 degrees. Okay, it's almost 6 pi over 6, which would be our 180 degrees. Right, so we're just past 180 degrees. We're right here. It's asking us for the cosine of a 30 degree, so that's the x value. So the cosine of 30 degrees is radical 3 over 2. So then it's negative radical 3 over 2 because it's in the third quadrant. Okay, I know that it's radical 3 over 2 because the rise of a 30-degree angle, right, if we have a 30-degree angle, it's going to rise a lot slower than it's going to run. So radical 3 over 2, remember, is bigger than 1/2. So therefore, the thing that's bigger in our 30-degree angle is the x value. So the x value is radical 3 over 2. Okay, and by all means, if you're struggling with these guys, use the unit circle. Okay, get used to knowing where are all the angles on this unit circle. Okay, I finished that one up top for a reason. It's so that you can use it to do these questions. All right, let's talk about how it can get a little bit harder. Now, these ones at the top, like 1 through 9 up here, these ones specifically are going to be ones where if we were in class, you would have a timed quiz on these, like 5 minutes, fill out 10 of them, okay? And so we did, I think, 4 or 5 of these last year. I can't remember exactly. But 1 through 9, you need to be super familiar and quick at those. So you should know how to do them fairly quickly. 10, 11, and 12, a little bit different. These ones I would never put on a timed quiz because they're a little bit more thought-provoking. If we would do enough of these questions, you would be able to memorize them pretty quickly. But based on online learning and just the fact that I don't think you need to memorize these ones as nearly as much, we don't worry about that. But we can solve these ones. They're definitely doable. So, cosecant of 30 degrees. Cosecant is the inverse brother to sine. Hopefully you remember that. So this is really asking us, what is 1 over the sine of 30 degrees? So we first need to determine what is the sine of 30 degrees. So I'm thinking 30 degrees looks something like this right here. Sine is the y value, so that's the y value would be 1/2. So this is 1 over 1/2. Well, how do we get 1 over 1/2? That's just going to be 2. Right? Because this would be 1 times 2 over 1, which is just 2. And that's how you would do one of these, guys. So let's take a look at this next one. This next one is asking us for what is the cotangent of 11 pi over 6. So it's really saying, well, what is 1 over the tangent of 11 pi over 6? So then we have to decide, well, where exactly is 11 pi over 6? 11 pi over 6 is almost 12 pi over 6. So that means we're almost here. So that's this 30 degrees. So then it's y over x. So our y value is 1/2. Our x value is radical 3 over 2. Remember, whenever radical 3 shows up in the bottom, it automatically means that this is going to become a radical 3 over 3 situation. Okay? Or this is where it could be helpful to know that it's 1 over radical 3. I forgot to say that this is negative, so then this is negative radical 3 over 3, or negative 1 over radical 3. The reason that this one might be nicer to keep in negative 1 over radical 3 is because negative 1 divided by negative 1 over radical 3 is going to give us 1 times negative radical 3 over 1. So this is negative radical 3. And by all means, guys, these ones are harder. The inverse ones are way harder. Because remember, we had to first figure out what is the tangent of 11 pi over 6. And then we had to figure out what is the reciprocal of the tangent of 11 pi over 6. Okay? So these reciprocal functions are way more difficult. Okay? Way more difficult. There's one more right here. My screen just froze. Okay, secant. So this is the reciprocal brother to cosine. So this is asking us for 1 over the cosine of negative 330 degrees. Hopefully we're starting to get a little bit better, right? Negative 330 is going to be all the way around the circle. So then cosine is the x value. So the x value is going to be radical 3 over 2. So then this is asking us what is 1 over radical 3 over 2. So then we got to simplify this. So this is going to be 1 over, not 1 over. It's going to be 2 over radical 3 multiplied by radical 3 over radical 3. So that gives us 2 radical 3 over 3. Okay. So that one, definitely a little bit more crazy, right? As always, guys, if you have questions about any of these things, I know the radians can make it tricky. I know the degrees being negative can make it tricky. There's so many small, minute things that can definitely make these questions tricky. So as you have questions, please come to office hours and ask. I'm there every day between 11 and 2 for you guys to ask me questions. I want you guys to try these last 14 questions. See how fast you can go through 1 through 10. Or if you're not understanding it very well, see how much you can wean yourself off of using the unit circle. Try to use it less and less for each question as you figure them out more and more. Okay, guys? So that's all we got for you today. As always, if you have questions, stop in the office hours. Have a great day.